The escape pod hit the ground hard. Metal screeched against rock, and sparks flew in every direction. Hyan held tight to her seat as the pod rolled 3 times before stopping against a massive tree. Her head spun. Her shoulder burned with pain. But she was alive. She pushed the emergency release button. The door hissed and fell open. Warm air rushed in, thick with strange smells. Hyan stumbled out and fell to her knees on soft purple moss. Above her, 2 suns hung in a green sky. This was not her world. This was not even close to human space. The transport ship was gone, destroyed by pirates somewhere in orbit. She was the only one who made it to a pod. Now she was alone on an unknown planet with no way to call for help. The pod's communicator was dead, smashed in the crash. Hyan stood slowly, her left shoulder throbbed. She touched it and winced, dislocated probably. She had to fix it soon or it would only get worse. But first, she needed to find water and shelter. The jungle around her was dense with plants she had never seen before. Some had leaves as big as her body. Others grew in spirals that seemed to move when she looked away. She heard something move in the bushes. Hyan froze. Her hand went to her belt, but her weapon was gone, lost in the crash. She had nothing but her torn uniform and her emergency kit. The sound came again, closer this time, heavy footsteps crushing dead leaves. Then she saw it. The creature was huge, easily twice her size. It walked on 4 powerful legs, each ending in claws as long as her forearm. Its body was covered in dark scales that shimmered blue and green in the sunlight. The head was narrow and sharp, with eyes that glowed yellow. Rows of teeth showed when it opened its mouth slightly. This was a predator, a hunter, and Hyan was prey. She backed away slowly. Don't run. Running makes them chase. She remembered her survival training. Make yourself small, don't challenge them. But her heart hammered in her chest. The creature's eyes locked onto her. It took 1 step forward, then another. Hyan prepared to die, but the attack never came. Instead, 3 smaller shapes burst from the undergrowth. They were young versions of the big predator, cubs, maybe a quarter the size of the adult. They rushed past the large creature and straight toward Hyan. She fell backward in surprise, landing hard on her injured shoulder. Pain shot through her arm and she cried out. The cubs stopped. They tilted their heads, studying her. One of them made a soft chirping sound. Not a growl, not a roar. A chirp, like a bird. Another cub answered with its own chirp. The third one crept closer, sniffing the air. Hyan held perfectly still. The adult predator watched from the tree line. It did not move, did not attack. It simply observed. The boldest cub came within arm's reach. It lowered its head and sniffed Hyan's boot, then her leg, then her hand. Its nose was wet and cold. The cub made a happy chirping sound and turned to its siblings. The other 2 rushed forward. Soon all 3 were sniffing her, chirping, and making sounds that almost seemed playful. One of them licked her hand. The tongue was rough, but not painful. Hyan let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. These cubs were not attacking. They were curious. They acted like puppies, not killers. The adult predator finally moved. It walked forward with slow, careful steps. Hyan's fear returned. This was it. The mother was going to protect her young and kill the strange creature touching them. But when the big predator reached them, it did something unexpected. It lowered its massive head and sniffed Hyan just like the cubs had done. The predator's eyes met hers. They were intelligent, calculating. This was not a mindless beast. This was a thinking creature making a decision. After a long moment, the predator made a deep rumbling sound in its chest. Not a growl, something else, almost like approval. Then it turned and walked back into the jungle. The cubs looked at their mother, then at Hyan, then back at their mother. One of them chirped loudly. The adult stopped and looked back. It made another rumbling sound. The cubs chirped happily and pressed closer to Hyan. She understood then. Somehow, impossibly, these predator cubs had decided she belonged with them, and their mother had allowed it. Hyan tried to stand, but her shoulder made her gasp with pain. One of the cubs noticed. It pressed against her good side, supporting her weight. Another cub moved to her other side, being careful of the injured shoulder. Together, they helped her to her feet. The third cub ran ahead, chirping excitedly. The mother predator called from deeper in the jungle. The cubs chirped back and began walking, gently guiding Hyan forward. She had no choice but to follow. Not that she wanted to refuse. Alone in the jungle with an injured shoulder, she would not last 2 days. But with these creatures, she might have a chance. They walked for what felt like hours. The cubs stayed close to her, adjusting their pace so she could keep up. When she stumbled, they were there to steady her. When she needed to rest, they stopped without complaint. The mother predator led the way, occasionally looking back to check on them. Finally, they reached a clearing beside a stream. The water was clear and cold. Hyan fell to her knees and drank deeply. The cubs drank beside her, splashing and playing in the shallow water. The mother predator laid down on a flat rock nearby, watching over them all. As the two suns began to set, the mother predator stood and walked to a cave entrance hidden behind hanging vines. She called to the cubs. They chirped and ran to her, disappearing into the darkness. Hyan hesitated at the entrance. The mother predator appeared again and made that rumbling sound. Then she turned and went back inside. An invitation. Hyan took a deep breath and entered the cave. Inside, it was warm and dry. The cubs had already curled up together in a nest of soft leaves and moss. When they saw her, they chirped happily. One of them stood and pulled at her uniform with gentle teeth, tugging her toward the nest. She understood. They wanted her to sleep with them, to stay warm together like a pack, like family. Hyun carefully lowered herself into the nest. The cubs immediately pressed against her, sharing their warmth. The mother predator laid down at the cave entrance, blocking it with her massive body, protecting them, protecting her. For the first time since the crash, Hyan felt safe. She closed her eyes and let sleep take her. Surrounded by the soft breathing of predator cubs who had decided she was worth saving. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, she was not alone. Hyan woke to something wet touching her face. She opened her eyes and found one of the cubs staring at her, its nose pressed against her cheek. When it saw she was awake, it chirped happily and bounced backward. The other two cubs joined in, creating a chorus of excited sounds. The morning light filtered into the cave through the vine-covered entrance. The mother predator was already gone, probably hunting. Hyan sat up slowly, testing her shoulder. It still hurt, but the night's rest had helped. She needed to fix it properly, but that would have to wait. The cubs wanted her attention. They tugged at her uniform and chirped until she stood. Then they ran to the cave entrance and looked back at her expectantly. They wanted her to follow, to come outside and start the day with them. She walked out into the clearing and stretched carefully. The two suns were rising, painting the jungle in shades of gold and orange. The stream bubbled nearby. The cubs immediately ran to the water and began their morning routine. They splashed each other, snapped at small fish, and generally made a mess of everything. Hyan smiled. Despite their fearsome appearance, they were still children, still learning, still playing. One of the cubs, the smallest one with a white mark on its chest, brought her something. A piece of fruit, purple and round. The cub dropped it at her feet and chirped. Hyun picked it up carefully. Was it safe to eat? The cub tilted its head, waiting. Then it grabbed its own fruit and bit into it, showing her it was food. She took a small bite. It was sweet and juicy, like a combination of berries she knew from home. Her stomach growled. She had not eaten since before the crash. She finished the fruit quickly. The cub chirped with approval and ran off to find more. The largest cub, one with dark stripes along its back, approached her differently. It did not bring food or want to play. Instead, it made a low clicking sound and started walking toward the jungle. It stopped and looked back at her. Another clicking sound. It wanted her to follow. Hyan followed the cub into the trees. It moved slowly, placing each foot carefully. It was teaching her something. She watched closely and tried to copy its movements. Step quietly. Avoid the dry leaves. Move with the wind, not against it. These were hunting lessons. The cub stopped at a fallen log and crouched low. Hyan crouched beside it. The cub pointed its nose toward a small clearing ahead. There, a creature like a rabbit but with 6 legs grazed on purple moss. The cub looked at Hyan and made a very soft, chirping sound. It was showing her prey, teaching her to hunt. But Hyan had no claws, no sharp teeth, no speed like these predators. The cub seemed to realize this. It made a thinking sound, almost like a hum. Then it picked up a fallen branch in its mouth and dropped it beside Hyan. It looked at the stick, then at the rabbit creature, then back at Hyan. Use tools. The cub understood that Hyan was different, that she needed different methods. It was adapting its teaching to fit her needs. Hyan picked up the stick. She waited until the rabbit creature turned away, then threw the stick as hard as she could. It sailed through the air and hit the ground near the creature. The animal jumped and ran directly toward the cub's hiding spot. The cub pounced instantly, catching it in one swift motion. The cub killed quickly and cleanly. Then it did something that surprised Hyan. It tore off a piece of the meat and brought it to her. An offering, a share of the hunt. She had helped, and now she earned part of the reward. Hyan knew she could not eat raw meat safely. Her human stomach was not made for it, but she understood the gesture. She took the meat and nodded in thanks. The cub seemed satisfied and began eating its portion. Over the following days, Hyan learned more from each cub. She began to think of them as Taiyang, Bora, and Minho. The names felt right somehow. Taiyang was the bold one with stripes who taught her to hunt. Bora was the smallest with the white chest mark who brought her food and showed her which plants were safe. Minho was the middle one who seemed to understand her feelings and stayed close when she felt scared or sad. The mother predator, whom Hyan called Day, watched over all of them. She was massive and scarred, clearly a veteran of many battles. But with the cubs and with Hyan she was gentle, patient. She allowed the cubs to teach Hyan in their own way. Sometimes Day would correct them with a grunt or a gentle nudge. Other times, she would demonstrate something herself. One morning, Day brought back a kill and called the cubs. They rushed over immediately. But this time, Day did not let them eat right away. She made a specific growling sound. The cubs sat. She made another sound. They lowered their heads. Then she made a third sound, and only then did they begin eating. She was teaching them discipline, rules, structure. When Hyan approached, Day looked at her. The great predator made the same growling sound. Sit. Hyan sat. The second sound. She lowered her head, copying the cubs. The third sound. Day pushed a portion of meat toward her with her massive paw. Hyan could not eat it raw, but she understood. She was being included in the pack's rituals. She was being taught their rules. She was becoming one of them. Later that day, another group of predators appeared at the edge of their territory. Hyan froze in fear, but the cubs did not seem worried. They chirped and called out. The other predators responded with their own sounds. They were communicating, talking. Day walked forward to meet them. The largest of the newcomers approached her. They touched noses, made rumbling sounds. This was diplomacy. These were neighbors, not enemies. The visiting predators looked at Hyan with obvious curiosity. What was this strange creature doing with Day's pack? The cubs rushed forward and began chirping excitedly, pointing at Hyan with their noses. They were telling the story, how they found her, how she joined them, how she was learning. The visiting predators listened, tilting their heads in that curious way. One of them walked closer to Hyun. She stayed very still. The predator sniffed her carefully, taking in her scent. Then it made a sound like laughter, a huffing noise from its nose. It seemed amused by the whole situation. A hairless creature with no claws or teeth, trying to learn predator ways. But it did not attack. It did not challenge. It simply accepted what the cubs and Day had decided. If Day said Hyun was pack, then she was pack. The visitors left after a short time. The cubs returned to Hyun, excited and proud. They had shown her off, introduced her, made her real to the other packs. As the days turned into weeks, Hyun grew stronger. Her shoulder healed. She learned the warning calls that meant danger, the chirps that meant food, the rumbles that meant safety. She learned to move through the jungle quietly, to find water, to avoid the territories of other, more dangerous creatures. She learned that the cubs played fighting games to build strength, that they took turns keeping watch at night, that they always stayed within hearing distance of Day. That family was everything to these creatures, and slowly, Hyun realized something important. She was not a prisoner. She was not a pet. She was being raised, adopted. These predators had taken her in not out of mercy, but because they genuinely wanted her as part of their family. She was becoming something new, not quite human anymore, not quite predator either, something in between, something unique in the galaxy. One evening, as they all rested in the cave, Minho curled up against her side. Bora rested her head on Hyun's leg. Taeyang kept watch at the entrance with Day, and Hyun felt something she had not felt since the crash. She felt like she belonged. The warning came at dawn, a long, low howl that made the cubs jump to their feet. Hyun had never heard that sound before, but she knew immediately it meant danger. Day stood at the cave entrance, her body tense, her scales raised along her spine. More howls answered from the jungle. Many voices, a pack, a large one. The cubs pressed close to Hyun, but they did not seem frightened. They seemed excited, ready. This was something they had trained for. Taeyang made sharp clicking sounds, battle sounds. Bora and Minho responded with their own clicks. They were preparing. Day turned to look at her family. She made a deep rumbling sound. Stay together. Then she made a sharper sound. Be ready. The cubs understood. They moved into formation. Taeyang on the left, Bora on the right, Minho in the center. They were protecting Hyun without even thinking about it. She was the weakest. She needed to be shielded. Hyun's heart pounded. She had no weapons, no claws, no teeth that could hurt these massive predators. But she could not just hide. The cubs trusted her. Day trusted her. She had to find a way to help. The rival pack emerged from the trees. There were 7 of them, all adults, all battle-scarred. Their leader was huge, bigger even than Day. His scales were dark red, almost black. His eyes held no mercy. This was a conqueror, a pack that took territory by force. The red leader made a challenging roar. It echoed through the jungle. He was claiming this territory as his own, demanding that Day and her cubs leave or fight. Day roared back. She would not leave. This was her home, her hunting ground, her den. The red leader had his answer. The 2 packs charged at each other. The sound was like thunder. Hyun had never seen such violence. Teeth and claws flashed. Bodies crashed together with terrible force. Blood splattered on the ground. The cubs fought alongside Day, working as a team just as they had been taught, but they were outnumbered. 7 against 4, and Hyun made 5. But what could she do? She was so small compared to these creatures, so weak. Taeyang was fighting 2 enemies at once. He was fast and clever, but he was tiring. One of the rival predators got past his guard and slashed at his side. Taeyang yelped in pain. The sound cut through Hyun like a knife. Her cub, her friend, her brother. He was hurt. Something changed inside Hyun. Fear became anger. Anger became determination. She was human. Humans did not have claws or teeth, but humans had something else. They had minds, they had tools, they had fire. Hyan grabbed her emergency kit from her belt. Inside was a fire starter. She had saved it, thinking she might need it someday. Today was that day. She ran to a patch of dry grass near the fighting. Her hands shook as she worked the fire starter. Sparks flew, once, twice, 3 times. The dry grass caught fire. Flames spread quickly, crackling and smoking. The smoke was thick and dark. It rolled across the clearing like a wave. The predators stopped fighting, confused by this new threat. Fire was dangerous. Fire could not be fought with teeth. But Hyan was not done. She grabbed a burning branch and waved it in the air, shouting at the top of her lungs. Human sounds, loud and strange and wrong to predator ears. She ran toward the rival pack, swinging the fire. The smoke stung her eyes, but she did not stop. The effect was immediate. The rival predators backed away from the screaming, fire-wielding creature. What was this? What kind of magic was this? The red leader snarled at her, but even he stepped back when she thrust the burning branch toward his face. Day understood instantly. She roared and charged forward, using the confusion to her advantage. The cubs followed her lead. Together they drove the rival pack back, away from the fire and smoke, away from their territory. Hyan kept yelling, kept waving the fire. She made herself as big and loud and terrifying as possible. In that moment, she was not prey. She was a threat. She was dangerous. The red leader made one final attempt. He lunged at Day, trying to assert dominance. But Tai Yang, despite his injury, rushed forward and bit down on the leader's back leg. Bora went for the other side. Minho jumped on his back, and Hyan ran forward with her fire. The red leader had enough. He shook off the cubs and retreated, calling his pack to follow. They disappeared into the jungle, defeated not by superior strength, but by something they had never encountered before. A small, weak creature that fought with fire and fury. As the enemies vanished, Hyan dropped the burning branch and stomped out the fire before it could spread too far. Her hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. She had just fought predators. Actually fought them. Taeyang limped over to her. Blood dripped from his side wound. Hyan knelt beside him and carefully examined the injury. It was not deep, not life-threatening, but it needed care. She tore a strip from her uniform and wrapped it around his body, tying it tight to stop the bleeding. Taeyang held very still, trusting her completely. When she finished, he licked her face. A thank you. A recognition. Bora and Minho pressed against her, chirping softly. They were proud of her. She had fought for the pack. She had protected them. She had proven herself. Day approached slowly. The great predator was bleeding from several wounds, but none were serious. She lowered her massive head until she was eye level with Hyan. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Day made a sound Hyan had never heard before, a deep, resonating hum that came from somewhere deep in her chest. It was a sound of acceptance, of respect, of equal standing. Day touched her nose to Hyan's forehead, a gesture the cubs did with each other and with their mother, a family gesture. But Day had never done it with Hyan before, until now. The cubs went wild with excitement. They jumped and chirped and ran in circles. Their mother had officially accepted Hyan as pack, not as a pet or a guest, but as a true member, as family. The celebration was short-lived. Day made a commanding sound. They needed to move. The rival pack might return with reinforcements. And there was something else, something Day wanted to show them. The pack began walking through the jungle in a specific direction. Hyan followed, still trembling from the battle. They walked for hours, moving deeper into territory Hyan had not seen before. Other predator packs watched them pass. Some called out in greeting, others simply observed. Word was spreading. A strange creature had fought with fire and won. As the two suns reached their highest point, they emerged into a massive clearing. And there, In the center stood a structure that made Hyan stop in her tracks. It was made of stone. Ancient stone carved with patterns and symbols. The building was enormous, easily the size of 10 houses stacked together. Wide steps led up to a huge entrance, and from inside came sounds. Many sounds. Dozens of predators, maybe hundreds, all in one place. The cubs chirped excitedly. They knew this place. They had been here before, but Hyan had not. She did not understand what she was looking at. Day made a rumbling sound. "Come." She began climbing the steps. The cubs followed immediately. Hyan hesitated only a moment before joining them. As they reached the entrance, she finally understood. The smells that came from inside were unmistakable. Meat, food, cooking fires. This was a communal place, a gathering hall, a place where packs came together to share and to strengthen their bonds, a place where alliances were made and honored. This was the dining hall, and Day was taking her inside. The cubs ran ahead, disappearing into the darkness of the entrance. Their excited chirps echoed back. Day looked at Hyan one more time, then entered. Hyan took a deep breath. After what she had done today, after fighting for her pack, she had earned the right to enter this sacred place. She walked through the entrance, leaving the sunlight behind, and stepped into a world she never imagined existed. A world where a human might just belong. The inside of the hall was darker than outside, but Hyan's eyes adjusted quickly. What she saw took her breath away. The space was vast. Carved stone pillars held up a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadows. And everywhere, on the floor, on raised platforms, gathered in groups, were predators. Hundreds of them, maybe more, all different sizes and colors and patterns. Some had scales like Day's pack. Others had fur or feathers. Some walked on 4 legs, others on 6. But they were all predators, all hunters, all dangerous, and every single one of them turned to look at Hyan. The hall went silent. The only sound was her own breathing. The cubs pressed close to her sides, protecting her from the stairs. Day moved forward, placing herself between Hyan and the nearest predators. Her message was clear. This human was under her protection. A massive creature rose from a platform at the far end of the hall. It was twice the size of Day, covered in silver scales that seemed to glow in the firelight. Its eyes were ancient and wise. Scars covered its body, telling stories of countless battles survived. This was the Alpha, the leader of all the packs that gathered here. The Alpha descended from its platform with slow, deliberate steps. Each footfall echoed through the hall. Every predator watched. This was a moment of judgment. The Alpha would decide if Hyan belonged here or not. Day stood firm. She made a rumbling sound, speaking in the language of her kind. Hyan could not understand the words, but she could hear the tone. Day was explaining, telling the story of how Hyan came to be pack, how she had fought beside them, how she had used fire to drive away enemies. The Alpha listened. Its eyes never left Hyan. When Day finished speaking, the great creature moved closer. It lowered its enormous head until its nose almost touched Hyan's face. It breathed in deeply, taking her scent. Hyan forced herself to stand still, to show no fear. She met the Alpha's gaze directly. If this was a test, she would not fail it. The Alpha's eyes narrowed. It made a sound deep in its throat. A question. The cubs responded immediately with their chirping. They were defending her, vouching for her, telling the Alpha that she was worthy. Other predators in the hall began making sounds. Some seemed supportive. Others seemed doubtful. A creature with black fur and white eyes stepped forward. It made an aggressive growling sound, a challenge. It did not believe a weak, clawless thing belonged in this sacred place. Before anyone else could react, Taeyang jumped between Hyan and the challenger. He was still injured from the morning's battle, the makeshift bandage still wrapped around his body. But he did not back down. He made his own growling sound. If anyone wanted to challenge Hyan, they would have to fight him first. Bora and Minho joined their brother. All 3 cubs stood in front of Hyan, ready to defend her. They were so small compared to the adults in this hall, but they were brave, fearless. The black-furred predator seemed amused. It took a step forward, ready to teach these cubs a lesson. But Day moved like lightning. She was suddenly between her cubs and the challenger, her teeth bared, her scales raised. The message was unmistakable. Touch my family and die. The hall exploded with noise. Predators were taking sides. Some supported Day, others supported the challenger. Arguments broke out. The peaceful gathering was about to become a bloodbath. The alpha roared. The sound was so loud it shook dust from the ceiling. Every predator fell silent instantly. The alpha made a commanding gesture with its massive paw. The challenger was to step back. Day was to hold position. Everyone was to calm down. Order restored, the alpha turned its attention back to Hyan. It tilted its head, studying her with those ancient eyes. Then it made a sound that seemed almost like curiosity. It wanted to know what made this creature special. Why should the dining hall privileges be extended to something so different? Hyan understood this was her moment. She could not speak their language, but she could communicate in other ways. She pulled out her fire starter from her emergency kit. With practiced movements, she created sparks. The predators nearest to her backed away, growling nervously. But Hyan did not light anything on fire. Instead, she held up the tool and made the sparks dance in her palm. She was showing them. This was her weapon. This was her power. Not claws or teeth, but something else, something unique. She put away the fire starter and pointed to her head. Then she made several gestures, acting out the battle from the morning. She showed how she had thought, planned, used tools and fire to help her pack win. She was demonstrating that strength came in different forms. The alpha watched closely. When Hyan finished her demonstration, it made a sound that might have been approval. It turned to address the entire hall. The alpha's voice carried to every corner, speaking in rumbles and growls that all the predators understood. Though Hyan could not understand the words, she could see the reactions. Some predators nodded. Others looked thoughtful. A few still seemed doubtful, but they did not challenge the alpha's words. Finally, the alpha turned back to Hyan. It walked past her to a large stone platform where fresh kills were laid out. The alpha selected a large piece of meat, carried it back, and placed it directly in front of Hyan's feet. The meaning was clear. This was an offering, an acceptance. The alpha was granting her dining hall privileges. She was being recognized as pack, not just Day's pack, but pack in the greater sense, part of the community that gathered here. The cubs went wild with joy. They chirped and jumped and ran in circles around Hyan. Day made her rumbling sound of approval. Throughout the hall, most of the predators made sounds of acceptance. Even the challenger bowed its head slightly, acknowledging the alpha's decision. Hyan knelt beside the meat. She knew she could not eat it raw, but she understood the ritual. She touched the meat with both hands, honoring the gift. Then she stood and bowed to the alpha, using a human gesture of respect. The alpha seemed to understand. It made a sound that might have been laughter. Then it returned to its platform, and the normal noise of the dining hall resumed. Predators went back to eating, talking, and sharing kills with their packs, but many eyes still watched Hyan. She had become something remarkable in this hall. Proof that pack bonds could cross species, that strength came in many forms. That family was not defined by claws and teeth alone. Day led her family to an empty section of the floor. The cubs settled down, and Day brought them portions of meat from the communal kills. When she brought Hyan's portion, Hyan smiled and shook her head. She gestured to her mouth, then made a fire motion. She needed to cook her food. Day tilted her head, confused. The cubs chirped curiously. Hyan stood and walked to one of the cooking fires that burned in stone pits throughout the hall. She held up the meat, showing the predators near the fire what she intended to do. They watched with fascination as she placed the meat on a flat stone near the flames, cooking it slowly. A small crowd gathered. They had never seen anyone prepare food this way. To them, cooking was unnecessary. But they watched anyway, curious about this strange ritual. When the meat was done, Hyan took it back to her pack and began eating. The cubs sniffed her cooked meat with interest. It smelled different from raw meat. Taiyang carefully took a tiny bite of the cooked piece. He made a surprised chirping sound. It was not bad, just different. Bora and Minho tried it too. They seemed to enjoy the novelty. As the meal continued, other packs approached Day's family. They wanted to meet the strange human who had earned a place in the hall. They touched noses with Day in greeting. They sniffed Hyan carefully. Some brought portions of their own kills as gifts, a sign of respect and welcome. One elderly predator, its scales faded to pale gray, sat beside Hyan for a long time. It studied her with gentle eyes. Then it made a soft rumbling sound and touched its nose to her hand. The gesture felt like a blessing from a grandmother, like approval from an elder who had seen many strange things in a long life, and was pleased to see one more wonder before death came. The cubs played with young predators from other packs. They showed off Hyan, clearly proud of their unusual family member. The young ones wrestled and chased each other around the hall, supervised by watchful parents. Hours passed. The two suns outside began to set, casting long shadows through the entrance. Packs began leaving, heading back to their own territories. Day stood and called her cubs. It was time to go home. As they walked toward the exit, Hyan looked back at the great hall. She had entered as an outsider, uncertain of her place. She was leaving as a recognized member of a community. She had dining hall privileges. She belonged. The Alpha watched from its platform as they departed. It made one final sound. A farewell. A promise of welcome whenever they returned. Hyan walked out into the evening air beside her pack. The cubs pressed close, tired but happy. Day led the way home with her usual confidence, and Hyan realized that she was no longer just surviving on an alien world. She was living, she was thriving. She had found a family in the most unexpected place, and she had earned the right to sit among predators as an equal. 6 weeks had passed since Hyan first crashed on the planet. 6 weeks of living with predators, learning their ways, becoming part of their world. She no longer thought of herself as a stranded human. She thought of herself as pack. Her body had changed during that time. She was stronger now, her muscles hardened by jungle life. Her skin was darker from the two suns. She moved differently, quieter, more aware of her surroundings. She could read the warning signs in the jungle, could understand the meaning behind different predator calls, could hunt small prey with tools she made herself. The cubs had grown too. They were larger now, more skilled. But they still played like children, still curled up with Hyan at night, still chirped with excitement when she taught them new human tricks, like stacking stones or making simple tools. Day had become more than just a protector. She was a teacher, a mother figure, a friend. Hyan had learned to understand the subtle differences in Day's rumbles and growls, could tell when she was pleased, worried, or giving orders. They communicated without words, through gesture and sound and trust. The morning started like any other. The pack woke early. The cubs splashed in the stream. Day went hunting. Hyan gathered fruit and checked the snares she had set for small game. It was routine, normal, peaceful. Then Minho made a strange sound. Not a warning, not a call to hunt. Something different, something uncertain. Hyan looked up and saw him staring at the sky. She followed his gaze and froze. There, high above the jungle canopy, was a metal shape. A ship. Not pirates this time. The design was different. This was a proper rescue vessel. Human design. Her emergency beacon. The one in her crashed escape pod. Someone had finally picked up the signal. The ship descended slowly, searching. It was scanning the jungle, looking for her. A rescue team had come. They were here to take her home. Home. The word felt strange now. Where was home? The small apartment on a space station she barely remembered. The transport ship that had been destroyed? Or was it here, in a cave with 3 predator cubs and their fierce mother? The cubs gathered around her, sensing her confusion. Tai Yang nuzzled her hand. Bora chirped softly. Minho pressed against her leg. Day emerged from the jungle, a fresh kill in her jaws. She dropped it when she saw the ship. Her scales raised defensively. Was this a threat to her pack? Yan had to make a choice. She could activate her emergency beacon's response signal. The ship would land. The rescue team would find her. She could return to human civilization, to safety, to her own kind. Or she could hide. Let them pass. Stay here with the family she had found. She looked at each of her pack members. At Taeyang with his healing scar and brave heart. At Bora with her gentle nature and clever mind. At Minho with his empathy and loyalty. At Day with her strength and acceptance. They had saved her life. They had given her a home. They had made her pack. But she was still human. And somewhere out there, humans might be searching for her, mourning her, her family back home if she had any left. Her fellow crew members' families who deserved to know what happened. She owed them answers. Hyun made her decision. She ran to her crashed escape pod and activated the emergency beacon's response. A bright light began flashing. The ship above immediately changed course, heading directly for her location. The cubs made distressed sounds. They did not understand. Why was she calling the metal sky thing? Day moved closer, protective but trusting. She waited to see what Hyun would do. The rescue ship landed in a clearing half a mile away. Hyun could hear the engines powering down, hear voices calling out in human languages. They were searching for survivors, searching for her. She turned to her pack. Tears ran down her face. She knelt and held the cubs close, one by one. She touched her forehead to theirs, the way Day had done to her. A family gesture, a goodbye that said she would never forget them. Day understood before the cubs did. The great predator made a sad, low, rumbling sound. Yan approached her and placed her hand on Day's scarred face. "Thank you," she whispered in human words that Day could not understand. But the meaning was clear. Then Yan did something she knew was important. She carved marks into her arm using a sharp stone. 3 marks for the 3 cubs, 1 larger mark for Day. Symbols that said these beings mattered, that this time mattered. That she would carry them with her always. The cubs finally understood. Hyan was leaving. They made crying sounds, pressing against her, but they did not try to stop her. They had been raised to respect choices, to understand that pack members sometimes had to go their own way. Voices were getting closer. The rescue team was searching methodically, following the beacon signal. Hyan stood. She looked at her pack one more time. Then she began walking toward the voices. The jungle opened into the clearing where the ship waited. 3 humans in rescue suits were searching the area. When they saw Hyan, they shouted with joy and rushed forward. "Survivor found! We have a survivor! Are you injured? Can you walk? How did you survive out here for 6 weeks?" They surrounded her with questions and concern. But they stopped when they saw her face, saw the marks on her arm, saw the way she moved like a predator, not like a human. Something had changed in her. Behind her at the edge of the clearing, the cubs appeared. They watched from the shadows. The rescue team noticed them immediately. Hands went to weapons. "Predators! Get back to the ship!" "No!" Hyan stepped between the humans and her pack. No weapons. They are not a threat. They saved me. The rescue team looked at her like she was crazy. Those are Vrakil. They are Category 5 predators. They are extremely dangerous. They are my family, Hyan said firmly. The team leader, a woman named Captain Jiwoo, studied Hyan carefully. She was experienced enough to recognize something unusual when she saw it. Explain, she said simply. So Hyan told her story. About the crash. About the cubs finding her. About Day accepting her. About learning to live as pack. About the battle, the fire, the dining hall. About being adopted by the most feared predators in the galaxy. Captain Jiwoo listened without interrupting. When Hyan finished, the captain looked at the cubs watching from the jungle edge. They really took you in? Yes. And you want to go back to them, don't you? Hyan hesitated. I want them to know I did not abandon them, that I had to come back, that humans deserve to know what happened. But yes, part of me wants to stay. Captain Jiwoo made a decision. Come aboard, get checked by our medical team, send messages to your family, do your duty to your own kind. But if you want to return here after, we will bring you back. This planet is about to become very important. Why? Because if what you say is true, you have done something no human has ever done. You have made peaceful contact with a species we thought was nothing but mindless killers. You have proven they have culture, family, honor. You have changed everything we thought we knew about Vrakil. Hyan had not thought about it that way. She had just been surviving. But the captain was right. She had proven that Vrakil were more than monsters. They were people, different, dangerous, but people nonetheless. She turned back to the jungle. Day had joined the cubs now. All four of them watched and waited. Hyan made hand gestures she had taught them. Wait, I return. Promise. Day made a rumbling sound. She understood. Or at least, she was willing to trust. Hyan boarded the ship with the rescue team. As it lifted off, she watched the jungle through the window, watched her pack standing together in the clearing, watched until they were too small to see. In the ship's medical bay, the doctors were amazed by her physical condition. She was healthier than she should be, stronger. Her injuries had healed remarkably well. Living with Vrakil had made her resilient. While the ship traveled to the nearest human station, Hyan did her duty. She recorded everything, made detailed reports, described Vrakil culture, their language of sounds, their pack structures, their dining hall traditions. She shared everything she had learned. The information caused a sensation. Scientists wanted to study the Vrakil immediately. Diplomats wanted to establish formal contact. Everyone wanted to know more about these mysterious predators, but Hyan made one demand. No one was to harm her pack. No one was to approach them without proper training in Vrakil customs. And most importantly, she was to be the primary human contact with their species. They agreed. How could they not? She was the expert, the only human who truly understood the Vrakil. 3 months later, Hyan returned to the planet. This time she arrived with proper supplies, communication equipment, and a team of carefully selected scientists who had sworn to respect Vrakil culture. She hiked back to the cave she had once called home. She was wearing ceremonial markings she had designed herself, symbols that combined human and Vrakil elements. She was representing both her peoples now. The cubs found her first. They were bigger now, almost adult size, but they recognized her immediately. They rushed forward, chirping wildly, jumping on her, licking her face. Taeyang, Bora, and Minho, her brothers and sister. Day appeared from the cave. The great predator moved slowly, majestically. She approached Hyan and touched her nose to the human's forehead. Welcome home, pack sister. That evening, Day led the pack to the dining hall. Word had spread that the human was returning. The great hall was packed with Vrakil from every nearby territory. They wanted to see her, the strange creature who had become one of them. The Alpha was there too. When Hyun entered, the ancient predator made a booming sound that echoed through the hall, a sound of celebration. The Alpha approached her with something in its jaws, a tooth, one of its own teeth yellowed with age but still sharp. The Alpha placed the tooth at Hyun's feet. It was a gift, a token of pack membership that could be recognized anywhere in Vrakil territory, proof that she belonged. Hyun picked up the tooth with trembling hands. She knew what this meant. She had not just been accepted by one pack. She had been recognized by the Alpha, accepted by all Vrakil. She was officially pack. She raised the tooth above her head. The hall erupted with sounds, roars, chirps, rumbles. Every Vrakil was celebrating. A human had become pack. The galaxy would never be the same. As the celebration continued, Hyun sat with her cubs and Day. She shared a meal prepared both human and Vrakil style. She told them about her journey, about the humans who wanted to learn, about the new relationship between their species. The cubs listened, fascinated. Day rumbled approvingly. She understood that Hyun was building something important, a bridge between worlds. Hyun looked around the hall, at predators who had once seemed like monsters, at cubs playing without fear, at the Alpha watching over everyone with wise, ancient eyes. She thought about the crash that had brought her here, the terror of those first moments, the impossible situation she had survived. And she realized something profound. Sometimes the most terrifying things become family. Sometimes the most dangerous places become home. Sometimes the most unlikely friendships change the entire galaxy. She was human, but she was also pack, and that combination was going to reshape the universe's understanding of both species. The Alpha caught her eye across the hall. The great predator made a sound that might have been pride. Hyun smiled and touched the tooth hanging around her neck. She was home, both homes, human and Vrakil. And she would spend the rest of her life helping both her families understand each other. Because that is what pack does. They protect each other. They teach each other. They love each other, no matter how different they might be.